release forms, consent forms, waiver forms. Is that a good subject to discuss for everybody? Okay, okay. First of all, I'll make a distinction between minors and adults. So minors under 18, adults 18 and older. There is a difference, okay? Minors, generally speaking, it's probably pretty much next to useless to have releases, waivers signed for a minor or on behalf of a minor. And you can't really give somebody else's rights away. Even if a parent signs a waiver and somehow bars the kid from suing, when the kid turns to be an adult and goes to a lawyer, they can sue anyway. There's nothing going to be stopping them from suing. And generally speaking, if children are hurt in your care, if there's going to be litigation, you're probably going to be paying. You're probably going to be negligent if they're in your care. Because the standards of care are so high with taking care of children and youth that generally if they're in your supervision and they're injured, there's going to be some basis upon which the plaintiff's lawyer is going to be able to prove negligence. Okay? So rather than thinking about waivers and releases for children, I want to get you thinking about something a little bit different. I want you to think about informed consent and parental permission. It's two issues that can be done on the same form. Informed consent is saying when you are proposing a trip, off-premises, sporting event, whatever, you're sending a piece of paper home with the child to be signed, to be read, signed, and returned to the church or charity for this child to participate. If that form doesn't come back, they're not in the event. And what the informed consent is doing is it's very clearly explaining what the event is, the nature of it, what the risks are, how you're getting there transportation-wise, when you're going, what you're doing. The parental permission side of it is just saying, having read the consent, are you allowing permission of your child for your child to attend and participate? You can put other things in there too. I mean, you could put a little throwaway statement about the fact that if there's a medical emergency, you know, we have your right to seek medical or emergency medical treatment. You might want to ask questions about, you know, food allergies, medical allergies, that type of things, drug allergies. But I want to talk about this informed consent and explain why it's much more beneficial than a waiver or release. And I'm going to give you an example, and for a second, I want you to put your board members or ministry or executive director hats away for a second, and I want you to put your parental hats on for a second. Think about yourself as mother or father to your own children, either at the age they are now or when they were growing up. And think about when they were younger and you dropped them off at a camp. Could be a day camp, could be a week-long camp. Let's say it's a day camp. You drop them off in the morning. You head off home or to work. It's a church camp, it's a Christian camp, you've dropped them off. Middle of the day, you're at work, you're at home, you get a phone call. Phone calls from the director of the camp. Says, your child has been injured, a broken whatever. They're at the hospital, they're going to be fine. But in the course of the conversation, they're saying, and by the way, they were over at some sports park, some climbing facility. They were in a boat, whatever. And you're going, hang on a second. I dropped them off here. I didn't know you guys were taking them anywhere. Now, honestly, what's your reaction going to be as a parent? Don't smile there and sit and be nice and say we're all Christians. Honestly, inside your own heart, what's your reaction? This is your child. They're hurt. They've told you they're going to be okay, but they didn't have your permission to take your child somewhere else. You didn't know they were going to be there. You made your decision to be involved in the camp based on what you knew, right? Now think about it. If you're talking from a non-Christian perspective, and you've got kids coming from the general public, think how much more parents will be less guarded about their reaction. Now take the very same example and say that instead of what happened, in advance you'd received an informed consent at home, clearly explaining what they were doing. On such and such a date, they were going by bus to, I'll pick something, Bingham Park in Kitchener, and they're going to go for a day of activities. And You know, here's how we're supervising them, here's what they're doing, here's when they're coming home. You've read it all, said, hey, as a parent, yeah, I'm okay, this sounds like fun, it's a good camp, you sign it, the call comes in the middle of the day, they've been hurt there, they're going to be okay, you're concerned, but what's your reaction? It's a whole different level, isn't it? The chances you're going to actually sue, especially if the injury isn't serious and permanent, means you're probably not going to have litigation in many cases. So it's not so much waivers and releases and guarantees, because I think most people, when they think about waivers and releases, they some people have the impression that, this piece of paper is going to save us from a liability claim on one extreme, and on the other extreme, they're saying they're useless. Well, the answer lies somewhere in the middle, but it depends on what you're talking about. So again, with minors, it's informed consent and parental permission that's an effective way to communicate. It's all about communication, really, isn't it? And the question you have to also say is, as an organization, say, okay, we've got teenagers in this group. We sent them home. We told them to tell their parents. Yeah, they told their parents. We don't have to worry about a piece of paper. Well, what are the chances that teenagers don't communicate well? Like seriously. So the piece of paper in this case is actually important because it's an acknowledgement of communication, right? With adults, it's a bit different. And historically, we didn't have liability claims to the degree we have now in society in general. And there was always this concept in law called voluntary assumption of risk, i.e., when you participate in something, you know the possible consequences, and if you get injured, hey, buddy, you're on your own. You're the author of your own misfortune. And so that concept's been eroded a lot, though. It still exists. But it is possible that adults, when they're injured, are considered either wholly or partially responsible for their own injuries. So getting an adult to sign a waiver or release, along with informed consent, no parental permission, obviously, is worthwhile. So waivers and releases drafted properly for adults, along with informed consent, is still an effective way to handle things. So remember, under those categories of saying, after the end of the day, we've identified, we've reduced, we've eliminated risk, we need to transfer risk we can't handle. Insurance is a good vehicle for that. We have agreed to indemnify our directors, but how are we going to do it? We're going to do it through a directors and officers liability policy. Okay. I don't know why anybody would want to serve on a charitable or nonprofit board if they didn't know they had directors and officers liability coverage. I mean, it may not sound like a very faith-based thing to say, but think about this for a second. Faith is a personal step. It's not a step of saying, well, we don't need insurance, and then finding out that somebody else's negligence basically wipes out your personal assets. Think about that for a second. That's not really faith. Faith is a personal thing. But when it affects other people, that's not really faith, is it? It's just irresponsibility. So it really is important to keep these kinds of things in mind when you're having the discussion. And it's great for one person who, has the shirt on his back, and another person who's, who knows what they're doing with their money. They're maybe a professional. Maybe they've got money willed to charities and everything else. Who knows? But the point is, you shouldn't be playing with other people's houses, their personal assets, things that they have for their family or whatever else. It is important to carry insurance in these cases.